Early history. The first mention of Hastings is from the late 8th century in the form Hastingers. This is derived from the Old English tribal name Hastingas, meaning the constituency followers of Hester. Simeon of Durham records the victory of Offa in 771 over the Hastingorum gens, that is, the people of the Hastings tribe. Hastings in Kent was named after that tribe. The place name Hastingaseaster is listed in the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle entry for 1050 and may be an alternative name for Hastings. However, the absence of any archaeological remains of or documentary evidence for a Roman fort at Hastings suggests that Hastingaseaster may refer to a different settlement, most likely that based on the Roman remains at Pevensey. Evidence of prehistoric settlements is present at the town site. Flint arrowheads and Bronze Age artefacts have been found. Iron Age forts were excavated on both the east and west hills. This suggests that the inhabitants moved early to the safety of the valley in between the forts. The settlement was already based on the port when the Romans arrived in Britain for the first time in 55 BC. At this time they began to exploit the iron. Wealden rocks provide a plentiful supply of the ore, and shipped it out by boat. Iron was worked locally at Beauport Park to the north of the town. It employed up to 1,000 men and is considered to have been the third largest mine in the Roman Empire. There was also a possible iron working site near Blacklands Church in the town, the old name of Pombay Bridge, for a bridge that used to exist in the area is a corruption of Pond Bay, as suggested by Thomas Ross, Mayor of Hastings and author of an 1835 guidebook. With the departure of the Romans, the town suffered setbacks. The Beauport site was abandoned, and the town suffered from problems from nature and man-made attacks. The Sussex coast has always suffered from occasional violent storms. With the additional hazard of longshore drift, the eastward movement of shingle along the coastline has frequently changed. The original Roman port is probably now under the sea. Bulverith was probably a harbour used by Danish invaders, which suggests that Hythe or Hythe means a port or small haven. Kingdom of Hastingers. From the 6th century AD until 771, the people of the area around modern-day Hastings identified the territory as that of the Hastingers tribe, and a kingdom separate from the surrounding kingdoms of Sussex, South Saxons, i.e. Sussex, and Kent. It worked to retain its separate cultural identity until the 11th century. The kingdom was probably a sub-kingdom, the object of a disputed overlordship by the two powerful neighbouring kingdoms. When King Wictred of Kent settled a dispute with King Ian of Sussex and Wessex in 694, it is probable that he ceded the overlordship of Hastingers to Ine as part of the treaty. In 771, King Offa of Mercia invaded southern England and over the next decade gradually seized control of Sussex and Kent. Simeon of Durham records a battle fought at an unidentified location near Hastings in 771, at which Offa defeated the Hastingers tribe, effectively ending its existence as a separate kingdom. By 790, Offa controlled Hastings effectively enough to confirm grants of land in Hastings to the Abbey of Saint Denis in Paris, but the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle for 1011 relates that Vikings overran all Kent, Sussex, Surrey and Hastingers, indicating the town was still considered a separate county or province to its neighbours 240 years after Offa's conquest. During his reign, Athelstan established a royal mint in Hastings in AD 928. Medieval Hastings. The start of the Norman conquest was the Battle of Hastings, fought on the 14th of October 1066, although the battle itself took place 9.7 kilometres to the northwest at Senlac Hill. William had landed on the coast between Hastings and Eastbourne at Pevensey. It is thought that the Norman encampment was on the town's outskirts, where there was open ground. A new town was already being built in the valley to the east. That new burgh was founded in 1069 and is mentioned in the Domesday Book as such. William defeated and killed Harold Godwinson, the last Saxon king of England, and destroyed his army, opening England to the Norman conquest. William ordered a castle to be built at Hastings, probably using the earthworks of the existing Saxon castle. Hastings was shown as a borough by the time of the Domesday Book, 1086. It had also given its name to the Rape of Hastings, one of the 6 administrative divisions of Sussex. As a borough, Hastings had a corporation consisting of a bailiff, jurats and commonalty. By a charter of Elizabeth Fun at 1589, the bailiff was replaced by a mayor. Muslim scholar Muhammad al-Idrisi, writing Sir 1153, described Hastings as a town of large extent and many inhabitants, flourishing and handsome, having markets, workpeople and rich merchants. Hastings and the sea. By the end of the Saxon period, the port of Hastings had moved eastward near the present town centre in the Prairie Stream Valley, whose entrance was protected by the White Rock headland, since demolished. It was to be a short stay. Danish attacks and huge floods in 1011 and 1014 motivated the townspeople to relocate to the new burgh. In the Middle Ages, Hastings became one of the Cinque Ports. Sandwich, Dover and New Romney were the first, followed by Hastings and Hythe, then Rye and Winchelsea. At one point, 42 towns were directly or indirectly affiliated with the group. In the 13th century, much of the town and part of Hastings Castle was washed away in the South England flood of February 1287 during a naval campaign of 1339, and again in 1377 the town was raided and burnt by the French and seems then to have gone into a decline. As a seaport, Hastings' days were finished. Hastings had suffered over the years from the lack of a natural harbour, and there have been attempts to create a sheltered harbour. Attempts were made to build a stone harbour during the reign of Elizabeth I, but the sea destroyed the foundations in terrible storms. The fishing boats are still stored on and launched from the beach. Hastings was then just a small fishing settlement, but it was soon discovered that the new taxes on luxury goods could be avoided by smuggling. The town was ideally located for that purpose. Near the castle ruins on the West Hill are St Clement's Caves, partly natural but mainly excavated by hand by smugglers from the soft sandstone. Their trade was to come to an end with the period following the Napoleonic Wars, for the town became one of the most fashionable resorts in Britain, brought about by the assumed health-giving properties of seawater, as well as the local springs and Roman baths. Once this came about, the town expanded westwards only, as there was little space left in the valley. It was at this time that the elegant Pelham Crescent and Wellington Square were built. Other building followed. In the Crescent, designed by architect Joseph Kay, is the classical style church of St Mary in the Castles, its name recalling the old chapel in the castle above, now in use as an art centre. Building the Crescent and church necessitated further cutting away of the Castle Hill cliffs. Once that move away from the old town had begun, it led to the further expansion along the coast, eventually linking up with the new settlement of St Leonard's. Such extensive development needed a large transient workforce. Many of the people coming into Hastings at this time settled on some waste ground to the west of the main town called the America Ground. This land, originally a shingle spit created by the Great Storm of 1287, was declared to be Crown property after an inquiry held at Battle during 1827, and the land was cleared in preparation for the development of this area of land by Patrick Robertson. Like many coastal towns, the population of Hastings grew significantly as a result of the construction of railway links and the fashionable growth of seaside holidays during the Victorian era. In 1801, its population was a mere 3,175. By 1831, it had reached over 10,000. By 1891, it was almost 60,000. Hastings Harbour Act, 1890. The last harbour project began in 1896, but this also failed when structural problems and rising costs exhausted all the available funds. Today, a fractured seawall is all that remains of what might have become a magnificent harbour. In 1897, the foundation stone was laid on a large concrete structure, but there was insufficient money to complete the work, and the harbour arm remains uncompleted. In fact, during World War II, it was partly blown up to discourage possible use by German invasion forces. Between 1903 and 1919, Fred Judge FRPS photographed many of the town's events and disasters. These included storms, the first tram, visit of the Lord Mayor of London, Hastings Marathon race, and the pier fire of 1917. Many of these images were produced as picture postcards by the British postcard manufacturer he founded, now known as Judge's Postcards. The German submarine U-118 was towed loose in a storm in the early morning of 15th of April 1919 and ran aground on the beach at Hastings in Sussex at approximately 00:45, directly in front of the Queen's Hotel. The wreck was an attraction until it was dismantled in 1921. In the 1930s, the town underwent some rejuvenation. Seaside resorts were starting to go out of fashion, Hastings perhaps more than most. The town council set about a huge rebuilding project, among which the promenade was rebuilt and an Olympic-sized bathing pool was erected. The latter, regarded in its day as one of the best open-air swimming and diving complexes in Europe, later became a holiday camp before closing in 1986. It was demolished, but the area is still known by locals as the Old Bathing Pool.